Hello, this Dating the Old Testament video is on the book of Lamentations. Let me share my screen. Okay, so there you have the picture of Jeremiah weeping beside Jerusalem when it has fallen. The author of Lamentations is traditionally understood to be Jeremiah. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, has an introduction before the beginning of Lamentations, really leading up to Lamentations 1:1, and it says, "And it came to pass, after Israel was led into captivity and Jerusalem was laid waste, that Jeremiah sat weeping and lamented this lamentation over Jerusalem and said," and then it begins the book in as we're used to it. So traditionally, it's understood that Jeremiah was the author of Lamentations. And with that, that really tells you all you need to know about when it was written. There is a competing school of thought that would like to make Lamentations a little bit later, but I think the bulk of the evidence favors Jeremiah. So we'll describe some of that. First of all, the book of Lamentations has some similar themes with the book of Jeremiah. They both have an allusion to national sin in a lot of places. It describes the guilt of the prophets and the priests. Jeremiah was both a prophet and a priest. And to describe the prophets as being guilty works better if it comes from the mouth of Jeremiah than if it comes from somebody else, because someone else might remember, well, we did have this prophet Jeremiah who was not really guilty, but Jeremiah could identify the false prophets, and that was a concern of his. And then both books talked about that Israel or Judah had placed false confidence in their allies, and sometimes it called those allies lovers, was one of the ways that he worded it. And there's similarities between the books in terms of vocabulary and figures of speech too. Both books, Lamentations and Jeremiah, seem to show a pretty strong dependence on Deuteronomy. The political climate is consistent with the time around the fall of Jerusalem. Jerusalem falls in 586 BC, but the author remembers the Assyrian Empire in Lamentations 5:6, and Assyria fell in 612 BC. So the author is a person who's old enough to remember that. That's a few years before Judah fell. Another thing that was typical of this particular time is the hostility that they felt toward Edom. This verse, "The punishment of your iniquity, O daughter of Zion, is accomplished. He will keep you in exile no longer. But your iniquity, O daughter of Edom, he will punish. He will uncover your sins." That seemed to be the one thing that all the prophets and the Psalms and everybody agreed on about this time, was that Edom was bad and deserved to be punished. Jacob have I loved, and Esau have I hated. You may have read before about how the book of Lamentations is an acrostic, and I think I can probably tell you something you don't know about it. First of all, you probably may have heard that there's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and Lamentations chapters 1, 2, and 4 are 22 verse acrostics. So that the first verse begins with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the second begins with a second, and so on until you get to the last letter of the alphabet. And chapter 3 is a 66 verse acrostic where the first 3 verses go with the first letter, and then second 3 go with the second letter, and so on, so you use up all the letters. But what you may not know is that in chapters 2 and 4, the 16th and 17th letters are reversed. And that is actually not the only time in the Bible that that happens. And there's an older inscription where it happens too. So it was apparently in an older version of Hebrew that the alphabetical order wasn't very firmly established. So that's actually kind of an evidence that this isn't too late of a book being written, because later on the current alphabetical order was very well established. So that's a connection to older Hebrew. So the conclusion, Lamentations, is much more straightforward than many of the other books that we have done, but it's that it was written shortly after the fall of Jerusalem by Jeremiah The fall of Jerusalem was in 586 BC, so it would be just a little bit after that. So that's the story on Lamentations. Thank you for watching. I plan to be back soon with another video.